Yeah, I like it. Very cool. Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, okay, great. So thanks for having me, Ariel. It's a pleasure and honor. I mean, it was really great when we did the Loop Art Critic a few months ago. It was a really nice opportunity. I love that initiative, and hopefully there's ways to, link different types of artists, because that's the thing with distribution. It's sort of just a very loose thing. Like, for example, you can be doing things in GIF format, or you can do it in it can be a gallery experience. But in essence, these meeting points really just bring in, I guess, lateral types of expertise. So I think that's really exciting, the idea of funneling one's history or one's background into something that is then comparable to another person who's coming from a completely different background. So congrats for that. And I mean, I really hope you keep doing it for a while and meet new artists, just like we met a few months ago. It was still very cold. Now it's warm. But yeah, it would really help me if we can just maybe. I just had a few questions. I mean, there's a few things I would like to ask the class in general. I was wondering where you think what do you think your ideal life would be after this current program or this current learning experience? What would be the ideal job, the ideal life, the ideal type of balance between both for you? Yeah, absolutely. Okay. How would you do that? What's the plan? What's the strategy? Right. And okay. So you feel like that pressure is actually going to fuel your creativity. Nice. And when when you're considering when you're considering 2D animation, what does that imply? Because it's such a big field. Is there a certain aspect of it that I guess excites you more? And it's an open question. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So there's a certain level of, I guess, there's a subjectivity or a human touch to 2D that you feel that other mediums don't have, like 3D and stuff like that. Yeah. And on that front, how are you different from a robot? if a robot can draw or a robot can make an image, how are we different from robots? Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So there's things about the way robots work that they're kind of delayed. You would say that there's a novelty to human expression, and robots aren't necessarily able to, have that subjective new reality to them that an individual can have. Is that right, more or less? So the style is what you think is different between a robot and a human? Yeah. Okay. Any other answers to this? I'm just curious how you feel about robots and AI in general. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Interesting. So the robot is fueled by what it observes from what has been made by humans. So it's sort of like echoing what has been done. It's kind of masticating and ingesting the things that it perceives, and then it kind of regurgitates its own version. And I guess my understanding is that you're proposing that human expression is sort of more of it's tilting in directions that perhaps that ideation process is innately that organic margin of error that can only be then echoed by mineral-based organisms, which would be the robots, for now. I mean, excuse me? Yeah. Lovely. Okay. Yeah, interesting. So yeah, there's some there's a contrast in the behavior and what you can expect from both. And I think Vian Art also mentioned that I guess the difference in your mind is intention, uh, in the sense that it's your intent that makes you different. Is that what you meant? Okay. 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 Yeah. 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 So cool. I mean, I've been thinking about it recently. I think I was looking at it was a presentation by, I think it was IBM. I'm not sure, but there was a quote about how technological concerns. It was about the importance of ethics in the deployment of artificial intelligence, and how at the core it's often there's almost professional myopia in referring to it as a technological issue, when in fact there's an underlying societal issue that is then crystallized into tech as almost it echoes these societal concerns. And I found that very interesting, this idea of looking at the technological concern as a societal concern. It's a very broad statement, but it brings in a lot of it creates a conversation that's much more fertile for exchange, because then you bring in the user experience and the human condition into it, instead of funneling it to a minority of experts in these technical abilities. And when you look at it from the artist's perspective, and I mean, you're all going to eventually have careers that are, you're going to go in different directions, and you'll be successful in different directions. And maybe you've already felt it, but there's a lot of things that we were already feeling as artists that simply are now embedded in these systems. So, for example, so I'm the creator of this. It's sort of like a comic book and also an animation series called Walking Bread. So it's sort of like a reverse. It's a sort of a comedy, surrealist, sci-fi, where it's a reverse zombie apocalypse. I'm gonna show you some footage of it. But what we've been doing is we've been going to Comic-Con, right? So I've been going to Comic-Con here in Montreal for a while, and I do have I was trained to be an illustrator, a medical illustrator, a decade ago. And in the world of illustration, you often go to these conventions. And if you're trying to showcase your work, what would you do, right? So if you go to Comic-Con, and it's an open question. I mean, if you had to showcase your work, and let's say you're into watercolor, you're into drawings, and stop me anytime, but if you want to answer. But basically, there are certain things that we do to, I guess, market our work, or sort of answer the needs of others when you go into places like that as a professional illustrator, a professional animation specialist, producer, director. So the thing that happened is that you would go to a place like that and you'd basically start drawing something like Spider-Man or Batman. It's not your character, but it's the thing that you draw when you go to a place like Comic-Con, because that's the consensus of it's like something that people recognize. So then they to measure, and I'm speaking like it's more complex than that, but to measure your abilities as an illustrator, as an artist in the wild west of the private sector, you are, for societal reasons, usually pivoted towards drawing something that is an established intellectual property, right? So you're going to go to a place like a convention and draw an oil painting of Batman, because everybody knows what Batman is. So people are like, oh yeah, it was a professional illustration of that established intellectual property. And when you're not that giant who has been marketing that IP for now decades, and you draw something like a Batman that's a bit different, the general reflex is like, did you make a mistake? Like, were you trying to draw Batman but you didn't, or were you actually trying to do something new, right? So you're in a situation where if you have creative ideas, but you don't have the moat of these private sector entertainment mechanisms, often your creativity might be misinterpreted as basically just like a mistake, like a margin of error. And I don't know if you ever felt that, like, you go to a place, you try to do something, or you try to draw something, but it kind of looks like something that people understand as a certain recognizable character, recognizable visual, but you made it a bit different, and we're like wondering whether or not you were trying to make it like that or not, right? So that's that's something that happens quite often, and it was happening before AI was there. So you would have situations where you're looking at artwork that is recognizable, and people try to do something different, but that difference is not necessarily seen as intent, when in fact sometimes it is. So when you fast forward to now, when you have things like automation and all kinds of AI tools, the reality of how the user is feeling it has nothing to do with AI. Basically, it's basically just the issue of AI is a non-AI issue, in the sense that you go into a place where now you are trying to make something like you're drawing an apple, or you're drawing a cat, or whatever. Like you're drawing a chair, and you're using something like there's different. Maybe you've played with them. Midjourney, Stable Diffusion. There's a lot of these tools, Python-based tools, and more that are giving you the statistical. They're basically paraphrasing what you're saying. You're saying, I want to do a cat, and they're like, okay, so you mean you want to make that cat because statistically that's all the cats we've been seeing for a very long time, and statistically it seems like this is the highest probability. This is the most probable cat that you were looking for based on your prompts. So it's not so you're in a situation where you're trying to create, but you're creating with these appendages to your body that are like speculating or estimating what you would have said, statistically speaking, based on what was said before you. So in a very like elegant, kind of ironic way, it's a way to actually lower the volume on new ideas, in the sense that you're in a situation where 10 years ago you would go to an illustrator convention and you would have to draw what is recognized instead of drawing original intellectual property, your own personal IPs, because of that reality of I call that the auction of reality. So in the sense that on social media, it's not necessarily democratic, in the sense that if you're marketing a certain thing, it shows up more than other things. So it sculpts convention, and it sculpts the collective subconscious based on what's appearing on people's feeds. So there was already a sculpting of what becomes your collective subconscious. There's an authorship in what we end up feeling is natural when it comes to the ideas we have, the icons that we recognize, like whether it's going to be Bart Simpson or again Spider-Man and Batman, or something really obscure that no one knows about. So there's so when you want to do something new, but you're confronted with that mechanism, it's very difficult to make new work, to make new intellectual property. You fast forward to now, we're basically just deeper in that same societal thing, because now it's like not only are you have incentive to make what has already been made, but now you also have automation, where you basically even before you get started working on what you're working, you're no longer doing it on a piece of paper. You're doing it with these tools that are basically regurgitating data collection and paraphrasing what you're trying to say by tilting it towards what is most likely you were saying. So there's good and bad. It's just a tool. It's not evil or good. It's basically just this thing that is regurgitating data collection, but that data collection it's the portrait of that reality auction. I call it, the term I use is entertainment terraforming, in the sense that entertainment culture terraforming is a process of, it's a creative marketing writing, a creative writing through database storytelling, with keywords, with marketing and stuff like that, to build viewer expectation on a specific IP prior to delivery. And that's what leads to these blockbuster films that are essentially the metric of success isn't so much discover something as much as it is to It's less about discovery, it's more about recognition. So you recognize. So when you go see, you know, Spider-Man 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like you want to see what you already understand, and it's I do it. We all do it in the sense that there is a certain pleasure in recognizing something that you. So basically limiting the contrast between your expectations and what you receive as an experience, as an audiovisual experience when you get there. But that metric is very different from discovery. So if you're a little fish and you're an artist, an independent artist, and you're trying to build new intellectual property, you're basically swimming against that current of recognition, because you're asking for discovery, and that's the path of most resistance, not least resistance, when it comes to just the way we communicate. So please remind me your name. I remember the answer when it came to drawing being sort of like the expression of individual subjectivity. So something along these lines. Maybe you can, yeah. Okay, Savannah. So please correct me if I'm filling in the dots in a different way from how you meant it. But the beauty of that is that you basically have subjective spatial schema, right? So you schematize your space when you look into animation filmmaking, in 2D animation filmmaking. There are specific things, we call it the way. So I work with on my projects, I work with cognitive scientists. So I work with people who basically look at how animation filmmaking, specifically traditional 2D animation, works, to learn more about cognitive processes. And I'm not a cognitive scientist, but as an artist, I sort of I appreciate the idea of that sometimes what they look at is temporality, right? So they look into different levels of space, and that space is in time, and the way we organize our ideas. And when you're developing things in 2D with traditional mediums, which they can be, you can use a tablet, but the cognitive process of actually schematizing space from your subjective view, it's almost like you're creating like a wrap around your story. You're wrapping the sentient eye of your viewer into this subjective wrap, and it's almost like an architectural thing. And it's like you have your own canon of physics. You're doing all these things to the space that have a canon that is innately independent, because it's coming from the way you're viewing that story. Yeah. So you have like you sort of develop a bunch of like you create like an ecosystem of like little things that are innate to the world you're creating, right? So for example, if I push Homer Simpson down the stairs, that will be very different from if I pushed like SpongeBob down the stairs, right? So there's like these secret physics there's like a brand of physics from one IP to another, right? So there's a fictional universe and things are within the convention of that universe. So in some worlds, like if a character dies, they're dead forever. In other words, like they just respawn the next episode and it's fine. So there's a certain level of like, when you create your own work and you're developing your own stories, and especially with 2D, you're basically also an author of a parallel physical world. And that's just one example of the many layers of complex problem solving that 2D animation goes through. So there's like a wilderness of what would be only seen as a margin of error for prompt-based data types of AI types of tools. That margin of error is actually the asset. It's actually the thing that initiates new intellectual property and basically stimulates diverse perspectives, diversity in the types of stories that are being told, and just that's what democratizes the storytelling process, as opposed to sometimes what would be more of a sort of like not always, but it's often what happens with asset-based, data-based, aggregates that are regurgitated. It creates a homogenization. So it homogenizes. It makes everything the same instead of diverse. So that's where I think a lot of people have felt that ethics becomes a thing, and it's more of a societal concern than actual technology concern, because it's not about like upgrading the app and adding a plugin to the app. It's the actual underlying reality of the humans in these labyrinths of appendages. Like, that's really where that happens. So that wilderness, that ecosystem of your own creative vision of how the world works is actually very precious. But that thing there is a lot of, again, societal reasons for that thing to be sometimes unable to survive. It's basically, washed by the current of either, the private sector's propensities to go for safer bets when it makes new work, or there's a lot of great opportunities in when you're working commercially. So it's a nuanced view, but in all that, the importance of institutions and the importance of, I think, schools and cultural institutions and types of organizations that aren't focused as much on the delivery of the final product and more focused on making the research and development or the process the actual product. That kind of model really helps create these safe ecosystems for the cultivation of diverse types of temporalities and spatial schematization that then comes out as either 2D animation, or it could be something different like sculpture, just artistic expression. So I'm gonna entertain you a bit, but long story short, the idea is to find ways to focus on it's like you want to reduce cognitive dissonance, in the sense that you got to see it for what it is to make sense of it. So as artists, we're going into a new existential crisis where we're feeling like maybe AI can replace some of the work we've been doing. It's sort of like when you look at it from the perspective of building new canons, and remembering that AI is regurgitating the statistical. It's like it's basically creating what's that word again? A median. It's creating it's approximating what would be based on what it has been observing. It's basically funneling it to one answer based on what it's seen. So that is not necessarily it's by definition not replacing what you're trying to do. It's basically doing like the echo of what it was done prior, and there's many ways where this is actually helping. Like, for example, if you want to go into 2D animation and look at the distortion of space and creating your own types of spatial schemas and temporalities, you're now in a situation where you can inject these frames, these images with production value that was never possible before, thanks to things like stable diffusion and other types of diffusion models that are providing you with buffing up your image with depth, texture, color, things that would have cost a lot just a few years ago. So in a very ironic way, it can actually also democratize that process, because now you're in a situation where you can make something in your own way and then inject it with production value in ways that wasn't possible before. So I'm going to show you some stuff, and then we'll talk about how how that links to the idea of a strategy for like coexisting with the new normal of AI in our daily lives. Yeah, I'm still here. I disappeared in a dramatic way because it's usually when you share your screen, it replaces the video, the camera. Sure. So I'm a creator currently at the National Film Board of Canada, and I've been doing this for around 10 years. So that involves building ideas with in animation filmmaking, and also looking into doing some research from the creator's perspective on technologies that can help that happen. So it's sort of the way I see my projects is sort of like snowballs, where that snowball rolling down the hill where a lot of things stick on it. It's we look at stories that need to be told, and then the actual tools will cater to that. And there's a experience that is gathered from looking at uncharted territories in that aspect. So it's a hybrid type of work where you're looking at what you want to say, you make the film, and you're also looking at ways to facilitate making it and on the tool level. So it's really exciting, and it's also a lot of fun. So now I'm sharing here this. This is just a little. I don't know if you see the actual video, or is it just let's see. I think not. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I will. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna make it big. But yeah, it's just an idea, right? So one of the many strategies. So everybody's coming up with their own strategies right now. There's one thing I tried doing. So it's a sort of like an in-house technique, which I'm calling. The way I call it is. The word I gave for it is genomic expressionism. So genomic expressionism from the genome, in the sense that when you aggregate data, and we've been mapping language or meaning for the last 20 years when it comes to these tech tools in different fields, whether it's mapping cities, mapping images. All this is now regurgitated. It's basically it's reverse engineered in the sense that you have it's synthesized into outputs, and these outputs are essentially mirroring the idea of a genome, right? So the idea of when you want to prompt an apple, and you basically write, I need an apple on a table, it's going to give you basically the ultimate, or the collective subconscious estimation of what's the optimal apple based on everything that was seen on the topic of apples for the last 15-20 years. through stock footage, Google searches, everything. So from that, on that level, it's genomic visuals, and expressionism, going back to the idea of drawing as a form of expressionism, in the sense that you're building stories, right? And this would be the expressionism aspect. The first aspect of it is the part where you're basically doing almost like the urban planning of your drawing, right? So you have the initial utterance, your initial human intervention to map the space, create that wrap, that subjective wrapping of space, before you start injecting it with that genomic aspect of visuals. So this is what this is going to do, right? You'll start seeing the different phases of the process. So this is a storyboard. Yes, it's an animatics. It's the animatic of the storyboard when you basically put the storyboard together and you start timing it. And in our case, it's sampling one part of the animatic just to show you that technique. So it starts off as in the beginning you have that urban planning, right? And it's almost like a communication. It's like a social process where you're essentially speaking to the robot, to the machine, and cooperating with it, and basically injecting different parts of it with prompts, with prompts of the desired volumes and textures, leading to a result like this. And from here, you basically reinterpret that footage with different prompts. Now I was looking for polygonal geometries, then I was looking for textures, and I was looking for different things, and then you combine them, right? So we go from something like this to something like this, thanks to some in-house software that we're working on here while the film is being made. Yeah, I'm using AI to build these textures in a way that's combining many tools. I can get in detail. In this case, you have some, among other things, depth-aware interpolation. So when you look at the difference between this version, so this version over here is very choppy, while this version is much more fluid, right? So this is because we're actually creating frames that didn't exist based on what was there before, and this creates sort of a vacuum, or sort of an ambiguity between the two frames that is then addressed as an image in itself to prompt with stable diffusion models on that ambiguous space between the two in the interpolation, to basically make what was just a transition into something much more opaque and volumetric. And essentially what's beautiful about this is that for the last so ever since the beginning of 2D animation, we've been in a world of, usually the mindset is it's like a mindset of scarcity, in the sense that you make your in-betweens, and then you're like, okay, this is like a 2 frame per second in between storyboard animatic, and now I need to work on I need to make all the drawings between these keyframes, right? So you start with the keyframes, and then the job is, how do we transition from this keyframe to this keyframe? In the last year, we're in a situation where it's the complete opposite. You're in a place of abundance. There's way too much noise. You're generating images, you're generating bitmaps simply by writing them. And now you're in a situation where you basically have to cut off. It's about what you don't show, because you're trying to reduce the noise. So it's the reverse model. Instead of it being by adding between the keyframes, now you're in a situation where you have 200 keyframes a second, and you're trying to cut stuff so that something can be retained. This leads to, this is why, for example, I'm interpreting the image as a 3D polygon, to basically overlap it to this, because this is still too noisy, so that then you can have this synthesis between the two, where now you can darken wherever the polygons were providing shadow. That is now a way to reduce the noise on the final image, because now it's becoming black. So there's less vibration and bubbling, boiling in the frame. You're in a situation where there's way too much information, not a place where there's not enough information. And it gets very exciting for that reason, because it's like an inside out of traditional animation. Another version of that would be, I'm going to show you here. I made a little scheme, a little expression of that. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So there's a reason why you want to, there's a place where the human drawings are innately, by definition, crucial. So because the machine has no needs, has no desires, right? So it doesn't the only reason is, it really depends on what you want, right? But that part of saying what you want is becoming the value, right? And depending on whether you're going to write it with a prompt or draw it, it goes back to that to that same quote unquote service of saying what it is you want, because it can be anything, right? And this here is basically just the same reality as what you saw in the previous video, but it's all in a much more, like, I've just laid it out in a more flat way, so you can see the same system of what genomic expressionism is practically. This is another scene where, as you said, Ariel, it starts off with the storyboard and the original drawings. So the black and white drawings on the top left are human. That's me drawing this scene. And then essentially, then you do this last phase of communication for your friend, the robot, where you basically just show a bit of hues and values. So darks and brights for the values and hues for the actual color, because those will be indicators. Those will be like the last notes for your pipeline. And then on the fourth frame, on the fourth square, that's when we start using depth-aware interpolation. So this here, it started off as a 2 frame per second image. Then we went to 6 frames per second in the black and white drawing. It's still very fast. Then I colored it but I colored just 6 frames for the second. And then we go into depth-aware interpolation. So for the fourth drawing, now you're starting to get like probably 80 frames per second, and you slow them down and stuff like that. And it's all thanks to an initial 6 frame per second. And the reason why you want to bring in values, so darks and brights and hues, beige, pink, beige, blue, is again so that these almost like these tectonic plates of mass that you've built in the previous steps is traceable or trackable by the depth-aware interpolation. So now you have a situation where it's going to track the beige, it's going to track the pink, it's going to track the teeth are tracked so that it can create your in-betweens. And of course, you go into editing. So you start looking into creating anticipation. So he's trying to, so that character, it's a villain in the walking bread concept, who is trying to eat a bread zombie, right? So you have the bread zombie on the corner. It's maybe a bit hard to see here because it's out of context, but essentially, since he's biting on the clothes, there's a sort of like a anticipation. You prolong these first frames, and then you go fast because then the actual teeth fall off. And this is done with you accelerate and you decelerate the now post depth-aware interpolation frames so that sometimes it's going fast, sometimes it's going slow. But you can see, again, you can appreciate how what used to be an additive animation process is becoming a reductive animation process. It's becoming a curatorial process where you have abundance. You have all the frames in the world. It's about the frames you don't show. It's about how you time it. Just like when you're directing an actor, the actor is living in a world of abundance where we're moving around on this planet and there's endless footage, right? So it's about documenting a certain angle at a certain time. It's a reductive process. And in many ways, we're going closer to what live action has been doing in terms of just the way they see things. A good analogy of that would be, for example, comparing claymation, or no, not claymation. Sorry, I meant like clay sculptures with wood sculptures. So when you're doing clay, you're adding little pieces on top of the previous piece to build shape. When you're working with a block of wood or marble, you're cutting pieces out of it. So we're going into a place where we're actually cutting pieces out of this kind of like mass, this malleable mass of like unactualized visuals on any topic. And that's kind of scary in itself when you think about it. It's kind of Lovecraftian almost, it's like this, there's like this, this underbelly of the visuals of every face that has ever existed, and you're just gonna, summon a certain angle at a certain time from that malleable mass of potentials as they mutate on the screen. So this here, as you go from the fourth square to now underneath, you see the parts where it's all the different layers, one on top of the other. Okay, so this here is just expressing that game with different prompts. So once you have the depth-aware, the product of depth-aware interpolation on the fourth square, when you go down, now you have all the layers of all these different frames that are combined for the final product. And the way this works, it's sort of like the analogy is with woodcuts. So when you look at the way, for example, someone like a woodcut artist like Hakusai, for example, the way these things are designed is you have a different plate for different colors. So you have the print, and you're going to have a plate for the red, a plate for the blue, a plate for the black, so on, and you stamp it one on top of the other. In our case, it's the same thing, but it's like in the fourth dimension. So it's like the same footage is overlapped on top of itself, but each time different things are masked, and then they're combined. Just like woodcut, right? So you would have, instead of having a plate for red, it's like a video plate. So it's frames instead of one static frame. And instead of it being red, it's going to be, for example, wrinkly old skin, right, for one of the layers. On the other layer, it would be the bread. Or on the other layer, it would be the wrinkly clothing. On the other layer, it would be the flesh of the teeth, right? So it goes on and on. That's kind of what happens when you combine it together. Let's see what else I have. For sure. Yeah. Oh, that's more or less most of the stuff. I had another one, maybe another 2 videos, and then we can open to questions. That's okay. Sure. Here I got another version of that for those that are interested in the tech. So here, this basically represents the same thing, but it's a different like a different version of. Different interpretation of the same concept, right? So the video you saw earlier has different layers, and it's again it overlaps on top of itself to create the final image, right? So So maybe just Ariel, this is mostly for your, I think it was a very, I think it's a good question, like which part is human? Okay, so this is just to show you where we stop working on the pipeline. So this is the amount, this is more or less where the part, so yeah, so I'm gonna make it bigger. This is all human until the parts that you saw in the previous videos, right? So this is to show you, this is a scene in the film, Bread Will Walk, and you are looking at, this is simply like almost like a utilitarian image, like a utilitarian like video, just to talk to that pipeline. So there's colors, there's line work. It's very rough. It's not even 6 frames per second. It's probably 2 frames per second, just as an indicator of where these plates of these masses are going to be moving in space. Oh, it's just tablet. It's a Photoshop tablet with brushes. So you basically have the brush for the pencil, and then from the pencil to color. And again, these colors are not aesthetic. It's not necessarily. It's really just, for example, you see all the clothes are blue. They're blue because when you saw the previous pipeline, if I'm going to prompt it, it makes sense to help the code, right? So you say something like, I need blue wrinkly clothes, even though the clothes won't be blue at the end, but it's just a way to actually isolate the clothes from the whole film so that they don't mix with the mud. So it's a great, like they're all blue here, but it's not because in the film everybody has to be blue. It's just because this color is only there for the clothes. And this way, all the clothes are treated one way, while the red tractor is treated differently. The beige of the bread is treated differently. The beige of the skin is treated differently. So this is more or less like the urban plan leading to some of the final results that you saw earlier. And specifically for this, just as a final video, you saw that this leads to, with that process, it leads to something closer to yeah, it leads to like, I think it's pretty cool. Like this, what you just saw here leads us to something much more sophisticated thanks to the collaboration, the coexistence, the coevolution with these new techniques that exist. So here you have, I'm going to make it bigger again. This is the same shot you just saw, but with all and it's still work in progress, but it kind of shows you that we're basically trying to photograph a subconscious photograph. It's a snapshot of the genome of all the photos that have been collected by data collection but it's expressionistic because you are still carving it out of the expression of space, the way the original line work is trying to carve it out, right? So it's expressionist because it's the wrapping of the subjective human temporality and space schema but now you inject it with the genome of image. So you have the bread, you have on the nose you saw over here, that is basically you have the fingers. All these things are basically, so so my characters have these ears that are bagels, right? So this here is a bagel it's like the ultimate bagel, right? The bagel of all the bagels, or you can call it a donut. And these things are just, plugged into different places strategically to allow for us to focus on certain things. Like in this case here, now we're focusing on the character, on that bread character. But previously it was something else, and you can actually you can work with ambiguity to serve on a dramaturgical it can basically be a way to curate your message as well, because you can focus on some things instead of others. So it's a whole new like wilderness of opportunity when it comes to building images. So yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because you're in a place of abundance, right? So suddenly you're in a situation where, unlike it has been for 2D animation for the last, forever, now we're in a situation where we have more. There's too much images, too much noise. It's because of all these things that have been deployed on as tools. So there's two schools of thought on that when it comes to the tech. In the process of this project, it's a very social process. So in essence, when the film started, it started off as a comic book, right? So this is actually. It started off as a book, right? So this here was almost like the DNA of the film, right? It was all in frames, and once that storyboard was defined, then it was about trying to make it happen, right? So to make it happen, we teamed up with different emerging startups that work in this field, as well as individuals who work in the field of these diffusion models and other types of technologies around, just the use of AI in different ways, whether it's lip sync and textures and stuff like that. And there's two ways. You can either have this sort of like a silo where you basically feed it your own work, and then it starts speculating what's next in your process. You can either do that, or you can look into models that are observing big data sets that are online data sets for specific textures. So it can be a piece of wood, and then it will just look into all the images of wood, and there's a lot of open source types of databases that are providing that texture. So for the film you saw, we worked with the two. So it's a combination of the two. There's in some cases it's mining. It's like sort of mining itself through the speculation of what would be drawn based on personal drawings that were then branch out into drawings that never existed. And I thought that process was super interesting, because it's like sort of basically just observing different angles of something that you didn't do in this timeline, but in this multiverse of different versions of yourself, you might have drawn that somewhere else. So that's what that was. And the other one was looking for example, a specific texture for the skin, which then would look into online data sets for that. So that's a really good question. it's still up for. I think it's still something that we'll hopefully be able to look into. It's sort of the thing with as artists, as authors, creatives, and artists. There's this place. There's like a place of creative expression that is like it's almost like it transcends to it's outside of the material, and it manifests in the material. So in the way like you can the decisions you took to make a certain scene involved bringing in props, environments, characters, and all these things, and it's sort of like the synthesis between all these things is the creative act. And now we're in a situation where you can inject that with that creative act with hopefully some you can leverage some of these tools to add production value at an earlier stage than before. So who do we credit? Do you credit when you're building if you're an architect and you're making a design, are you going to credit the materials that were used for the building, or is it sort of like the synthesis of all the things that led to that design, right? So it's sort of like it's still up for debate. I think the question is, my hope is that we're left with more questions, less answers at the end of any of these conversations on the topic, so that at least there can be a more open debate about it, basically. Exactly. I was going to say the bricks, but not all buildings are made with bricks, so I stopped myself. Mm-hmm. It's an ongoing conversation in the sense that I think it's a very, very interesting question that you're asking, whether or not the topic, the way the topic itself is framed, whether or not framed, but like whether the way it's the mindset with which we initiate that conversation, is it in itself, does it have redundancies, or is it not focusing on maybe something you would want to focus instead? And I mean, that's maybe one of the suggested routes when it came to creating, having a strategy to just keep animation relevant, which I think it will, personally. It's really also, again, situating that conversation in its continuum with all the other things that came behind it. So, for example, just another example of societal, we discussed, for example, the the Comic-Con phenomenon, which is you go to a place as a human being talking to other human beings, but you're economically incentivized to draw what has been terraformed by colossal marketing campaigns prior to you. So you end up in a situation where you're cosplaying as a character that everybody else knows because of the societal the infrastructure that has made Batman an icon. So you're already socially you're already in a situation where you are automating your creativity because you are drawing something that was made before you. That's one way. What's one thing. Another thing is when you look at how applications that are prompt-based images, how they, you can cosplay, then introduce your work within the context of that perspective, absolutely, and you're leveraging on that entertainment terraforming that came before you you leverage on that as an artist. So you're sort of like riffing on these titans of communication to be an individual in that context, and sort of when you're looking into injecting diffusion models into your process as a 2D animation artist, I think there's a bit of maybe an echo to that. But another societal underlying, when you look at the origins of our current situation, was really the blurring between art being an act of production and art being an act of consumption, right? So there's this blurring between the two in the sense that today, when you look at these apps, it's just really fun. It's fun to do it. So it's like you're in a situation where the act of creation is something being reduced to basically just like, what do you want? The machine will do it for you. But it's like, when did being an artist become like a shopping experience where you're basically entertaining yourself by making it? Was that the only purpose of it, or is this again a societal pressure to render an artist as indifferentiable from any like you can either play golf or do art, right? That's kind of what the message is, and it's been the message for a while. When you look at the blurring, when you look at how social media kind of flipped the balance, I mean the dynamics between media producer and media consumption, where in essence the producer of media is now bidding for real estate on my wall. So instead of me paying the artist for the animation, they're paying social media to be seen on my wall. So that flipped that I think that economy to a place where suddenly making films is becoming a personal act of consumption, where I'm consuming the privilege of making a film and now I'm paying for it. So that also blurred the line between the production of art and the consumption of producing art, which is now also facilitated with AI. So there's all these, really, really creative, really, I think, interesting questions that it's like an opportunity to talk about these things because they existed even before. And again, the reoccurring, one of the reoccurring motifs is the importance of institutions to basically sustain or allow for that forum of exchange, so that we don't completely homogenize the visual story. Yeah. Well, I think it was like a dream, right? So it came out as a dream. So this here behind me is one of the masks. So okay. So I haven't put it on in a while, but yeah. So it's actually made with real bread. I have little crumbs on me, but basically this went to, we brought it to, Comic-Con 2 weeks ago, and also, it's like a Halloween thing, and it's just it's it's been a recurring ritual of wearing at different places. A lot of my friends are wearing their own versions as well. But yeah, to answer your question, it was like a dream, and then you just kind of go with it, and you go with it, and I think there's a lot of parallels between that and some of the processes. And by the way, I absolutely think that there's definitely a lot of private sector opportunities as well to go, because I do think that it's, what the irony is, that when it feels like often it's like this idea of there's a lot of beautiful initiatives that companies can take to develop, to provide opportunities, and it's really just also the idea that a lot of institutions are already doing it, and it's like finding the place where both can coexist. Because I absolutely agree that there's a lot of I think companies and in the industry systems that allow for that as well. Yes. Mappa? No, I don't think so. Let's see. Mappa. Yep. Yeah, it's like the process of comedy and some of the absurdist genius that you get from Adult Swim and Cartoon Network. In essence, to me, it's still something that it bleeds out of the tools, but it is a bit more, it is trickier now. Like it's not the same as saying, I agree that it's not the same as saying, well, is Adobe, not Adobe, but does like someone talked about Maya or ZBrush, or these I don't even know if ZBrush exists anymore, but just a 3D program is replacing creativity. It's different from aggregating utterances and regurgitating the statistical probability of what you might have said, which is what some of the AI is doing. But again, if Cartoon Brew is using it, that can be good, it can be bad. I think there's a lot of cases where I do feel that a lot of the anxieties that we're feeling were present before AI was in the spotlight. That's the only thing I'm suggesting, in a sense that it feels, when you observe the experience of a creative, often a lot of things are up for debate at a certain point, and then they're sort of embedded, they become systemic, right? So it's like there's been a lot of things in the reality of a creator that make being a creator difficult, and if some of them have been crystallized or kind of like embedded in now automation, it's basically just an opportunity to talk about these underlying societal concerns. Like if you, for example, want to build a house, like draw a house on, it's an interesting idea, talking about that, something like a media outlet. Like I'm really thinking in terms of mainstream animation outlets, because if you're looking at humor, you are tapping into the genome of a certain image to reduce the question marks. You can get to the humor as soon as possible. It's almost like when you have an IKEA manual and you're trying to build that chair with the manual. Are you going to also have that? Is the stylization of the chair the focus, or are we trying to get that chair image that is the least confusing so that we can get to building the chair? It's kind of like that's what that does. That's part of the service of automation, in the sense that you can plug in what has been voted by our behavior as the common denominator of what that chair is, so we can get to the humor, so we can get to the creative writing, right? So in many ways again, that's a way to that is also a form of production value to independent authors, because you're in a situation where you benefit from it's like a consulting. You consult, it's like a subconscious consulting where you can basically reduce the question marks. You can get a message across in a way that wouldn't have been possible in prior. So that's why it's nuanced, and I think it's there's more questions right now than actual answers. But I do feel like there's a lot of I absolutely agree with the anxieties. I just think that the anxieties were actually there before this year, or like it's been now like a year and a half, when it came to stuff like what we discussed with just the reality of being an artist trying to make work. And there's also cases where this can actually enhance the process, I think. What's really, pardon me? No, I was just saying it's really interesting what would happen if you look into, because in our case, like 2D animation is often implies an actual linear film, but I mean there's a lot of interactive opportunities. Maybe I'm curious what's going to come up in the next few years on that front. Yeah. So there's like a major like macro shift in, I think, human experience, where indeed, going back to, I think, some of the stuff we talked about earlier, I think it's about I see them as like organisms, right? So the organisms behave differently depending on what they do. And indeed, if you're in a situation where your incentive is to sell a product and your focus is on the final stages of it, it is in fact by definition completely within the functioning of that purpose to also deleverage the middle parties to reduce the resistance leading to that. And that leads to, again, a concern that has been existed for a very long time between machines replacing workers again. So like if the organism is focused on the final delivery, then yes, there will be a lot of there's going to be a lot of deleveraging of middle parties, but through automation. And you have a situation where again, that's a very old thing, like because another something that I find very poetic is that because of recent AI tools, we're actually in a place of the surface of the image. We're back to the editing. We're back to the superficial, and not in a pejorative way, because for the last 15, 20 years, what you've had is an asset-based pipeline where you basically build assets, 3D, and then you render it. So you're kind of in the grid. You're not actually on the front, but now you're back on the front. So you're back on the human perception. So this is an example of how, private sector, public sector, no matter the organism, if the organism is focused on the final product as the sales or the delivery as the focus. They've been trying to have assets and variable avatars and stuff for a very long time already, so they've been doing it. That's where it gets really interesting when you shift that delivery. So if the delivery is more on the research and development, and it's more on the lab, the creative lab as a product in itself, then you have a situation where there's ecosystems that are actually keeping the human in the equation, because that is the service, that is the product. And that's where I think cultural institutions are going to be existentially important in the next 10 years, because depending on the context, these campuses, these organizations that are focused on the creative process as the actual purpose. So the culture generation, the diversification of culture, the diversification of voices, if that is the focus, then these ecosystems will, by definition, because the result is important, the artwork is important, but it's also part of a process, and all the research, all the development, all the experiences from the user's standpoint within it will be the product. So it's just a completely different shift. So it's just a very long, disjointed way of saying that a lot of companies will do it, and the companies that focus on, who find value in learning from the human existence within that, will be, I think, safe environments for human expression in the next while. So some of us can just keep doing what they're doing because it'll be more and more important, to have opportunities for artists to make work, to the point where it's just like humans, like for opportunities to humans to still make work, or to be able to express themselves without being paraphrased by automation. So again, from the user standpoint, I'm sort of more of a artist. So I've been kind of like collaging all these tools from the coding side with in-house software that automates the activation of different software. So it's not one thing. It's kind of like a combination of things. But the big idea is that what Stable Diffusion does is that it's easier. It's just simpler to develop versions of your image sequentially, right? Instead of it being on one image. So you can prompt, for example, you can make text to prompt. You can prompt video, of course, but again, that it being rough around the edges is the asset. So especially when you're doing 2D animation and you're doing when you're doing expression, you're trying to add the expressionism component to this process. You wish for things to be loose enough. So that's why I think Stable Diffusion, I think that answers your question, is just a good way to just focus on one thing at a time. So what it does is you have a video. This video is brought in. It's basically converted to a frame, to a sequence of frames, and then these sequence of frames are one by one treated the way Midjourney treats one frame, but it does it still in a way that's disjuncted. It's not as continuous as for example text to video, but it's almost like, for me, I see it like the bicycle, right? The bicycle has a wheel and the rest of the bike, and the wheel is by definition supposed to be separate from the bike for it to work. It's kind of, that's what that does, because that patchiness of it is actually creatively interesting for the process.
Okay, so guys, just as you know, This is Alex Boya. I think I mentioned him last week. I'm looking for your avatar. Oh, he's down there. This is him. This is him as an avatar, right there. And he's going to be talking about his artwork, the style that he uses, and I will be. He actually can see us. So what I will say is, like, please pay attention. I am screen recording. Alex comes here voluntarily, to talk about his work. It's only going to be about 30 minutes, and then I will go over some things for the rest of the class. But since it's only 30 minutes, I'm actually going to let you take it away.
Yeah.
And we'll just start now.
Hi everyone. Thanks for having me. It's again a pleasure, Ariel. So thank you. We met through Loop Art Critic, which is a awesome platform. I hope you keep doing this because it's important. So this version will be more speed metal. We did a death metal last time. This time it's going to be a bit faster. But I'm going to start by trying, hopefully, entertain you with the wonderful world of the Walking Bread, wonderful world, and then we'll get to Q&A, and hopefully we can talk about some strategies on how to coexist with the new normal of AI and all that. Okay. So I'm going to start with just showing you a brief intro of the story. It's basically both a channel, as you saw, a Jiffy. It's Jiffy and other social media platforms. It's like a sort of an experimental animation world-building channel, and also a animation series. We're currently making the pilot, so hope you enjoy. Da, 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 da.
There we go.
Oh. Oopsies. I'm just trying to build some suspense.
I know. It's our weird physics.
Yeah, it's great.
Talk about some weird physics in Loop. Like, we have this really strange gravity, and you can drop off.
But it makes things fun, it's like you can play soccer and volleyball, but so it seems like I can't put it back on, I can't make it straight, but I guess you can see, Ariel, right? If I
yeah. What
right?
you can do is you can hover over, and then I can try to rotate it, actually.
Oh.
Let's try to rotate it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
It's always happens.
I can just upload a second time. It's no big deal. Okay. Oh, wow. That's experience.
No.
You have mastered the physics of
it's backwards, but that's okay.
It's great. Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Actually, if you allow me, sorry, I'm just gonna.
So Alex, while he does that, Alex uses AI, but he uses it in an extremely interesting way, and it's not the kind of style that you guys might have come up with where you're doing a text prompt and you get an image. It's not like that. And he's also interested in animation. He actually works on the film board for Canada, and he does research into animation.
Yeah.
So he's very, very relevant for an animation class.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, I mean, to kind of echo that, it's the we do use so indeed it's not the traditional prompt-based types of bitmap generations that you've been seeing online, but it's sort of like a milkshake of a lot of beta software. So it's in-house software, and as you might have heard before, there's like a healthy volatility to having these rougher applications of tech, in the sense that it allows for that creativity to leak out. So we try to keep, at least I personally in my trajectory, try to keep it beta, or keep it in the coding as much as possible. And I'm not a full-time programmer, or I'm not a hacker. I'm more of an artist, but just kind of playing with it. And now with ChatGPT, it became a bit easier to just define what you want and maybe translate it to code, but you keep it loose. So you keep it not all centralized into one software to be able to make these creative glitches out of it, right? So basically this is the Walking Bread. It's the like our summary of the universe. So I'll play it now. So yeah, basically the technique is symbiosis of two principles in more recent tech. One is the depth-aware interpolation that you can find in many types of programs. So that basically bridges images that didn't exist based on previous and next images. So it creates in-betweens. And the second big idea is the diffusion models. So when you bring in texture and different images within the net of your drawing, and this is done with prompts. So in this case, you have some bread prompts as well as different textures, and essentially this technique is an experimental technique. There's different versions of applications of these new technologies. I personally call what I do genomic expressionism. So genomic in the sense of the genome of the image, almost like a reverse data collection. So it's the regurgitation of data in these databases. And this specific, this is sort of like a sci-fi comedy. This would be like the first episode of something like a Twilight Zone. So you would go from one thing to the next, and maybe in the next episode would be something completely different, a bit like Love, Death, and Robots, but more animation oriented. The dream is to maybe do like a Love, Death, Robot meets Miyazaki type of story in the sense of traditional as well as emerging animation. And yeah, this please, Ariel, if you feel like I should bring some of the videos of the previous one, I will. I found this one that was more concise, but I mean, I'm more than happy to share some of the previous videos as well for the technique.
I like the one where you were showing exactly how you're putting the texture on.
Definitely. Okay.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
Perfect. So I'm gonna do that, and yeah, and we'll go to that storyboard and then into.
That storyboard was really interesting, and yeah. So, and I love the term genomic expressionism. So essentially, he's using the AI, the text-based AI, mainly for textures, to bring in different textures of bread and that kind of stuff. I forgot what you said about that. You said a little bit more about bringing in different textures.
Yeah, so of course it's somewhat poetic. I'm not necessarily the engineer. I do have a bit of training in the sense that I'm very lucky. Oh, I'm very lucky to be surrounded by, again, that ecosystem that allowed for these experiments. So usually I'm not the smartest person in the room 99% of the time, which is great. So I'm surrounded by very intelligent people in different fields that are helping to basically support the creator on many levels. So um, you know, we talked about that a bit earlier, but we're reaching a point now where it's like it's like this clay of applications, and they're malleable and they're distorted, and it all ends up being we blur the lines into basically code, and this information is applicable in so many ways, and so it's not what it used to be. Like, we used to be trained at, for example, working with Photoshop, working with After Effects, but now it's like this very weird social feeling where you're starting a project, and as you're starting, it's like a snowball where all these things can stick on it. Different tools, different people, a flood, a surprisingly diverse flood of startups are very interested to work with artists. So you can build this kind of you're socializing the project, but you're not only socializing, as you saw in the Jiffy channel. What the Jiffy channel essentially did with its reach was generate demand for that specific IP. But the new thing, which was alright, kind of there already, but it's really strong now in the last year, personally. It's you're not just socializing the consumption of it, in the sense, there's probably better words for that, but it's not just that, you're not just generating demand, you're also socializing the actual process of making it by bringing in all kinds of brilliant people throughout the process. And I found this very interesting and very exciting from the creator standpoint. As long as you have ecosystems like institutions to support that and be able to provide the infrastructure for that to happen. So I think these things are crucial. But this here is essentially a product of that, right? So it's like the genomic expressionist technique is, in essence, reverse data collection. It's the genome of human utterance for different aspects, right? And in our case here, the goal was to go from, I'm going to start playing it while I'm talking, but essentially what you see is it starts off as a storyboard, right? So it starts off as an animatic, and then the magic begins. So basically I'm basically talking to the computer, talking to the machine, and cultivating different stuff from information. And there's some of it is human in the beginning, and then quickly you start letting it inform itself as you're guiding it, a bit like some sort of like texture image curator, and you're doing like the inside out of photography, because you're tapping into the data set of different prompts. And in this case here, I'm looking for rubble, I'm looking for cement, but it's also space, right? So how do you upgrade? You start from what is essentially a symbolic space, so a representation of space, so the utterance, the human utterance of space, and then it gradually, you sculpt out photographic depth instead of representational depth. And that's one of the revolutions of like, at least in this case, I don't know how revolutionary it is for others, but to me, at least as an artist, it definitely was, because you're suddenly, you see what I'm doing here? I'm basically defining space photographically, and what this does is that you bridge what was initially intent. And that's so what was initially intent and you see in the earlier in the beginning here, in the first squares, you have storyboard line work, and eventually what you're getting is something like color. And I'm gonna make sure that this loops properly because we're both open. Yeah, so just a second, sorry.
And the first part of that is all drawing that you did,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
The first part of that is all drawing that he hand drew using Photoshop.
Yeah, Photoshop as well as yeah, exactly. So Photoshop and Wacom, just some brushes and all that. But I'm gonna be able to show here.
He draws a storyboard, and then basically he fills in areas with textures that he's getting the AI to help generate into certain areas. That's why he has, for example, that green background in a certain area is actually just to tell it that is where to go and where not to go.
Yeah, exactly. And when you see here, I'm gonna actually use that avatar this time. My face is gonna emerge at different places. So here you see over here, and that spot over here, this is the human intervention, all the way to the third one, right? So the third one is where this is like the last step of human. Before the human's still there, but now suddenly, what used to be, I'm sorry, Ariel, do you see that? Is that mouse visible to you as well?
No.
Okay. Because on my side there's like a pink, anyways. So yeah, so the third square is the last part where you're actually working, on your own. So what you're doing is really putting in values and hue, so beiges, browns, reds, as well as brights and darks, to then basically communicate with your tools. And after that, there's a depth-aware interpolation on the fourth frame. So suddenly, what used to be a 6 frame per second drawing is now 80 frame per second. And now suddenly you're no longer creating in betweens, you're curating, because you're in an abundant state. Suddenly you have way too many frames, and it's about the pauses you make, and it's about the decisions you're taking to curate the space. And when you look below in the squares, after that, this is where what you saw earlier, these stages, they're basically strategically, there's like a strategic masking of these places to lead to something like the final image, which is basically respecting your creativity, in the sense that it's seeing your initial image as like the urban planning of what is then injected with production value to lead it to something actually comparable to a 3D animation or like a stop motion animation. Although it's different, it's cool in its own way. What it does is that it basically bridges what used to be intent, symbolic space, to actual photographic space. And what this does is that it reduces the question marks when you're presenting a project, or you're making a film. And in many ways, that's the value of like consulting the collective subconscious of what does a specific image mean for the aggregate of all the images of that thing. And one of the comparisons was with like an IKEA manual. When you have an IKEA manual, you're looking for that the archetype of the table, and the different steps of building that table. You're not looking for stylized versions of that table. You want to go to that archetype of the table so you can move on to how to build it. So you're trying to reduce the question marks. And in many ways, that's what live action has been doing with its immense budgets for a very long time. It's really a clear image, so that then you can tell a story. And often when we're doing animation, we're still at the buffer of stylization, and it's sometimes difficult to get immersed in a story. And this is what led to, as discussed more in depth earlier, the leveraging of reusable assets. Once you've established an IP and its code, its canon of existence, right? So it's like the different rhythms of what it means, like whether it's going to be Spider-Man or a Pixar film. Once you've established these aesthetics, you can move on to actually telling a story, but you already have that database of established intellectual property canon. What's exciting now is that you can have diverse new forms of expression leveraging on these databases to develop new ideas and new IP. So it's a very exciting time for independent animation, as long as you have platforms and institutions to allow for that co-evolution with tech instead of just the replacement of humans, right?
Yeah, I think what you said earlier was really good, and I know you have to go soon, but it was that basically you can up the production value. So you can make things that look as if they're much, much more expensive.
Yeah.
On a much smaller budget using AI.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's definitely there. I mean, I still have a good 10 minutes for Q&As if ever useful to you.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. So that's I think the idea of injecting production value, as you were like it's also an opportunity to democratize storytelling. But again, it's like this place, where it's the AI issue is maybe not an AI issue. It's actually a societal issue with underlying things that existed before. We've keyworded it now as automation. There's usually a moment of where things are up for debate before they get, they get crystallized in our systems and they become systemic. We're at that point now where there's a debate going in the sense that is automation going to contribute at homogenizing language? So is everybody going to have to do Mickey Mouse now because that's what the database is mostly representing because of colossal marketing for some intellectual property that then becomes the standard? Or is it going to be a moment where you can pause, or not pause, but at least allow for co-evolution by switching these models to a place where research and development are the product and the implication of humans is the product because there's a coexistence between tool makers and producers. So instead of it being the final sales of the film, which in this case completely incentivizes choosing the path of least resistance and deleveraging artists, because you can now automate some of it, which we've been doing anyways with asset-based types of production pipelines, or if you pivot to a place where the actual human is more interesting to us, which is for most people, then suddenly you can have situations where these tools are actually, as you were saying, injecting as you were echoing this idea of like it makes something look more expensive, but it looks more expensive because we've reduced, we have bridged what used to be symbolic space of a storyboard to photographic reality. So there's less question marks for your audience. It flows like water because now there's an abundance of image, of texture, of information that just we couldn't ever muster has it just been 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yes, that's really interesting. Yeah, when people tell me like, oh, that's made by AI, that's not much. Actually, I think a lot of the stuff that's made by AI looks much more complex than what the person could have done if they were doing it in an old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
It's just that it's moved so quickly that we're kind of forgetting that a single person being able to, for example, draw 6 frames and then get it up to 80 frames, that is an amazing feat.
Yeah.
For that to happen, especially for an individual artist who doesn't have a company and have people that are assisting them to draw individual frames in between that. So if you can use AI like that, then you're doing something extremely remarkable with the technology.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's brand new. But
yeah, it's brand new, and that's what he means by frame interpolation. It's just and is that you're able to add all these different frames in between without the laborious redrawing of them.
Yeah.
And what he's adding textures as well. So you can have a storyboard, you can then extend that storyboard, and then you can have textures that are going from one bit to the next, which is how he gets the look that he gets. And I'm trying to show a piece, just going to grab one from Jiffy, that makes it look like it's sort of like hand drawn over and over and over again. Because that's what I thought when I first saw your work. I thought it was hand drawn. And I couldn't believe that you were using AI at all. Of course, now I can't find something because I'm searching around on Jiffy, but I'll find it on your website. So let me see if I can find. I know you have some on the National Film Board. There we go. I'm playing Turbine. So, and what makes it look like it's hand-drawn frame by frame is actually this texturing of and frame interpolation that's allowing it for that kind of nice movement in the middle. When did you start working this way?
Well, it's been a while that these that I've tried to introduce that type of work. It's really started again from the. It was more of a poetic journey to that. Was initially trained as a medical illustrator. It's been a while now. So at that time, I was starting to flirt with notions of what we would call, we would refer to it during the process as medical expressionism, in the sense that it's the expressionism through the language of medicine. So the idea of bringing things to an opaque anatomy when in fact they're immaterial. So I mean, there was specifically a film prior to that called Focus, which is about ADHD, and it's trying to discern that feeling of losing focus, but in very opaque terms, frame by frame, through the medium of animation, and specifically with the medium of medical illustration. So from that poetry, I'm a big fan of artists like, for example, Fritz Kahn, who was an educator who hired a lot of illustrators to vulgarize in a good way complex science into consumable, simple ideas. Like, for example, mostly known for the cross section of the man-machine, which compares the digestive system to a Ford production model. So you have this cross section of a human with the profile, and every part, every organ is compared to a car company, right? So it was made in the 30s, or very early, at the beginning of that idea of industrial production. But he would often compare things and create these analogies to explain things. And the beauty of that is that healthy volatility, where it's again rough. It's approximate by design, and I found that very interesting to use that language, and that trickled down into with the zeitgeist of preventive healthcare as an idea that became more and more prevalent, more and more present in a lot of people's minds in the last few years. This recycling of ideas of genomic space were kind of echoed in some of these processes from that poetic standpoint, and then the tools followed. So to answer, you would have cases where something would pop up, like a tool that was still very rudimentary even a few years ago. None of that was possible, but they were, I was trying to bring some of these tools in there, but specifically the idea of database, reverse database, or like the underbelly of observed photographic memory on a collective level is now, turned inside out through these tools. That is something that is both terrifying but also maybe exciting for some artists to employ these clays of meaning, because we're basically in a situation right now where, again, ironically quite it actually flattens things quite a bit, even though it emphasizes a lot of this. I think a lot of underlying. There's a lot of inequality from that will unfortunately be enhanced when used for things like, for example, replacing the people on the pipeline. It's in parallel to that, there's potential when it comes to allowing any person to leverage the billion-dollar marketing campaigns of established images, because now these images have meaning, but this meaning can be a skin that is then riffed on or collaged into a new meaning, but you're basically piggybacking on that established canon to do something different, which is a service that, you know, if I'm, for example, you know, like there's aesthetics, logos, all kinds of things that can be sculpted, and I mean, this was also done before. You know, you have cases like Banksy doing it, you know, and other artists, other contemporary artists doing it for a very long time, where they're kind of like twisting and distorting the idea, something that has meaning for people prior. So creatively, all that is exciting as well.
You open for a couple questions, maybe? You have time? One question?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Anybody have a question about, yes, Quanish? Can you speak up so you can hear?
Yeah, so I want to ask you about, do you like use an AI for texture of faces for your characters?
Do you use the AI for the texture on the faces of the characters?
No, that's a very good question. So again, with database storytelling, what the Jiffy channel did was basically terraform an inexistent canon, which is the eyes that are very close to the head. So if I try to make a face on AI, like there's no databases for that face. And that's what's interesting when you start building, if you're trying to say something and the AI is saying, no, what you mean is this, because statistically that's what you would have meant based on what I know, that's when you know you're doing something new. Right, so again, I mean,
that's what I all the time. I say I actually have them test their concepts with AI, and I say you want the AI to struggle, and you won't be able to get it. So can you expand on that, because you just backed me up?
yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, go on ChatGPT, try to say something original. If you just write try to write it in better English, and if it rewrites it, but it's not what you meant. It's like saying something different, something much more like, you know, the common denominator of what you would have said based on what it expects you to say. Then you know you're actually building something. You're carving out new frontiers for the database. And this is like a meta multiverse sculpture, sculptural type of authorship, where now you're sort of like in this mosaic of potentials for your message, and this mosaic could have manifested in many ways. But if you're trying to say something and you're being paraphrased into saying something else, it's a good sign, and it's also annoying because basically these appendages to your expression are working against you. So to answer that question, the faces cannot be automated. So there's that urban planning of initial 2D animation is something no one can take from your process, and that's I mean, I'm hopefully being cautiously optimistic because maybe there is a way that I can't imagine, but at least from what I've observed, there's by definition, by nature, there's something about the sentience of a human exploring an image and creating it, and then speaking it to someone else that is impermeable to that, because the machine just doesn't do that. It's not sentient in that way.
Yeah. Anybody else have a question? Oh, can you quickly go over the difference between something like Stable Diffusion, which is the type of AI you use, and how it's different from something like a Midjourney?
Yeah, so from the perspective of user experience, because if you speak to you know, someone who does more coding than I do, I'm sure they're interchangeable once you tweak the Python based architecture. But essentially, at least from the application side, Stable Diffusion is good for sequential treatment, right? So it's different from prompt text to video. Text to video is on another. It's something different. But when you're trying to inject production value in the urban planning of your animated interstices, your utterance from your drawings. What Stable Diffusion did is that it dealt with the video in terms of a sequence that then follows the prompts, and then there's variable. It's a complex thing. There's a lot of things, like for example, the seeds can be constant or variable. So when it's a constant seed, it means that it kind of follows the same treatment for all the frames, and this creates sometimes like a layer effect on everything, because there's like these hooks on the image. So you can have reproduce variable seeds, but in that case there's a bit of a shakiness to it. But what this did is that it created a sequential it dealt with source video in a way that Midjourney doesn't, from face value. With Midjourney, you can generate images from scratch or based on image, but when you start seeing these videos that are made, that's a different thing. It's like the 3D cameras that they use is a different process from using your own video. So it's like a balance between authorship and production value.
You're using your own, like you start off with that storyboard. AI doesn't create the storyboard, doesn't create the hand drawing.
Yeah.
So basically, the Stable Diffusion is what helps you do all of the interpolation. And when he says increasing production value, that means he can make it look way more expensive.
Yeah, that's a better way of putting it.
That's what sometimes I have to interpret you, Alex.
It's amazing.
I actually thought you were ChatGPT for a while. You were doing that, the non-talking critique for Ryan, the artist in depth, and his all text-based critique. And when Alex wrote his things, I was like, he's running these things to ChatGPT.
Did you check?
No, I said, how do I check?
You can.
I was just like.
I shouldn't say this because all the students are going to be. Basically, you can copy paste something, put it on ChatGPT, and then it'll tell you if it was produced by ChatGPT. So if anybody tried to write an essay in the class with ChatGPT, I just told how to decode it. So don't even think about it.
Yeah, right. But no, that's why they don't write really in class. They don't write more working. But yeah. So does anyone else have any more questions? One more. Yeah.
So I just want to ask you about the technique that you use in your animations, and it would be about AI. So you dive into Stable Diffusion, like for the backgrounds and everything, so you can like download these kind of images and just